So this is the beginning of step 3. We will be looking at how we want to structure our files. And this is a follow-up to the prior video, step 2. So if you haven't watched step 2 yet, pause, scroll up, watch step 2, then come back. We will still be here, okay? So step 3, a file for every county. Melinda, you're the best person here to help us understand the pros and cons of this process.
Yeah, so this part of the video is really going to talk about how you're going to approach entering the data if you're going to create a file for every county in your LME, or versus you're going to create one file for all of your counties. And so we're first going to talk about how you would enter your data if you're using a single file for every county. And the first thing that we want to do, and the reason we're approaching it this way, is because this is going to be the least work for you. So the very first thing I would want to do if I had state supplied data sources, so I would start with entering my data that is LME MCO level or provider level data within an LME. That's going to make it so you don't have to enter it multiple times. And so the LME level data is the Youth Prevention Survey data. Provider level data is going to be your FDA data or your opioid data if you have small numbers in your communities. As a reminder, we have shared a file to show the actual FDA tobacco data inspections, as well as how you decide whether or not to use the county level data or your provider level data. And the general rule is when you have at least 25 inspections or overdose cases, you're going to use your county level data. And if you have fewer than 25, you're going to want to consider looking at the provider level to ensure that your data is not skewed by a small number of events. But as we do this, once you've entered your LME MCO level data and your provider level data, those are the things that are going to be the same for all of your counties. Then you're going to save that. That's your master template, and you're going to add to it from there. So that's going to enter, if you only have state supply data, that's going to enter the bulk of your data. So you could do that there. So I would do that first step of that's creating the master template. So you're getting that higher level data, and then you're going to save it, and then you're going to create a separate file for each data. And then you only need to go in and enter the data that you have at the county level. That's going to be a lot, your consumption data. So that would be things like how many opioid prescriptions you had. There's not a whole lot of county level consumption data. There is more potential for county level consequence data. So that's going to be things like fatal automobile crashes. It's going to be things like alcohol-related ED visits, alcohol-related death. I would do these after you've gotten the LME level data in. I would do these by data source, because that way you're going to be able to get everything for one data source and then move to the next. And that's just going to make it easier to process. At the top of every page, as you can see in the box example, you have a place to select or enter your data source. And again, that's either going to say the state supplied data source, or it's going to allow you to enter the name of your local data source and population. So basic criteria: enter all your LME and provider level data, and you're going to go by data source. And so that should make it so that it's a little faster and easier to get through the documentation part of this process.
So Melinda, after making your master file of sorts, you can just rename each subsequent file. So you have your master file. Then if you move on to Stokes County assessment file, then you can go back to your master file again and complete Carteret County. Go to your master file again and complete Buncombe County.
That's exactly what I would do. And I would try to name it real systematically, saying something like CPS, Alliance, Needs Assessment. And then for the next one, I would have Alliance, Poe, Wake, Needs Assessment.
Okay. And we will be providing a template naming scheme in the very, very near future to help everybody organize their files. So stay tuned for that. We realize naming schemes are a little bit cumbersome and hard, but we will be managing a significant number of files, and you will be as well. So it may help long term. And I do apologize. My office has a tin roof on it. So, and we're having a storm come through. So you may be hearing my rain on the tin roof. So if you appreciate rain on tin roofs, I have a nice place for you to enjoy a storm. But my apologies.
I have to comment on that, as my 13-year-old wants to be an architect, and she's designed a tiny home, and she specifically wants to have a tin roof.
Yeah, so we can give her a tour one day
Yes.
if she wants to come to Southwest Virginia. So step 3.
Yeah,
For every county, this is continued.
Mm-hmm. So when you are creating a separate file for every county, you have flexibility in how much of the data you enter at once. So you might decide that after every step you want to talk to your stakeholders, or you might decide you don't want to talk to them until you've entered all your problem data and intervening variable data. There's no right or wrong to that. It's just really kind of your relationships with your community and how they like to approach things. So if you want to just work through what your problems are first, that's fine. If you just want to work through your problems with different niches, that's also fine. Or if you want to bring the whole big picture, talk about the problems and then why they're happening, the intervening variables, you can do that too. So this is really one where it doesn't matter, as long as you do need to start with your consumption and consequence data. So that's what the problem is. As you might remember from the instructions, you don't have to do intervening variables for all problems. You do have to do it for your high and very high priority problems. And here I'm going to put in a plug-in for getting your review, because if you're going to only partially address your intervening variables, which is okay, you do want to make sure that you've cleared the hurdle to make sure how you ranked your problems is going to be okay. Because if it's not, you might have to go backwards and go do that again. But if you're confident in that ranking of your problems, you only need to do intervening variables and capacity for those big problems in your community. So this is, again, one. It doesn't matter if you complete all your intervening variable data and your problem data, or if you complete your problem data, work with your stakeholders, then come back, completing your intervening variable data, work with your stakeholders. You could choose whichever makes sense in your community.
there is a particular item, speaking with stakeholders after you have entered problem data. Don't discredit receiving feedback from your community sectors and your community members and stakeholders to confirm or to question or relook at the information that you're collecting. The more time that you spend in conversations of give and take, of confirmation and questioning, the better quality product you will have. Now certainly given the current COVID circumstance and setting, that's hard because of attention spans, especially for public health professionals that may be focused, and our community members that may be harder to get to. But the effort and the willingness communities, I tend to believe, really appreciate that at least we tried to receive their feedback and comments and suggestions during this process. Because if we don't do that, is it really a complete needs assessment process?
Yeah, those are excellent points, Jamie. We know it is more challenging, and you very well may not be able to reach as many stakeholders as you would have ideally included. But we do know there's a lot of ways stakeholders add values. They expand the discussion about why problems are happening where they are. They can add different data sources. They can add different understanding. There may be something that you would have completely missed in terms of a factor if you hadn't involved certain types of partners. And so it's important to do it to the degree you can. I think the state will likely have a little bit of latitude on your stakeholder involvement given COVID-19. But it is super important, and it should add value, especially our goal with these, of course, is that we're going to use them to make decisions about what strategies we're going to use in our communities.
Okay, let's transition to all counties in one file.
Okay, so a lot of people have multiple counties in one LME MCO catchment area. And that means they're going to have a lot of overlapping data, but they might also want to be able to compare to their neighbors. So there's places where they have data that's the same, and there's places where they don't, but they want to look at that relative to other sources. So the easiest way to approach things when you're going to include all of your counties in one file is to enter your data by data sources. And so again, this is the documentation part of the process. So what I would recommend if you're using mostly state data is I would start with the Youth Prevention Survey, because that is going to be what's common across all of your counties. So if you go in and you enter your 30-day substance use, if you go in and enter your intervening variable data, and so forth, that'll populate more than half of the assessment with what's common in all the counties within that LME MCO. I would next then just look at things by data source, and that's going to really be, if you are only using state supplied data, that's going to be really your surveillance data, like the opioid dashboard, the alcohol dashboard. It's going to be your FDA data, which you can look at from the FDA tobacco inspection site or from the summary report that is hosted on the TTA website. You're going to take those are your county level measures. You're going to copy the set of measures, and we'll show you this on the next slide, and adding additional sets for every county that you're going to include. And so this approach will reduce how many things you have to do for every county and hopefully increase the efficiency with which you do it. And I believe on the next slide, Jamie, there's some examples about how we do that. So this is an example of how things would look for each column of the assessment. So as you can see in the first box on the left-hand side, we have an example with alcohol ED visit rates. And so if you were going to include multiple counties, you would just say County A prevalence, County B prevalence, state prevalence. The state prevalence is already populated, and of course, County A, you're going to replace that. So maybe it's Alamance County, maybe it's New Hanover County, Pender County, whatever those counties are, you're going to just replace local with the county name and then type in their data. So you'll have a few more lines of data with just copying and pasting that. Similarly, we'll do that. The intervening variable data will be really similar. If you look at the second box in the left-hand column, so we've identified the measure, we've listed County A, County B for the examples, and of course we'd replace those with actual county names. We also included, because this is a possibility for the FDA tobacco inspection data, the provider's catchment area. So that might be ADS, this region within Sandhills, for example. So you could have each of your counties, as well as your provider level data and state level data. The ranks, they have a lot more potential for data. And this is a place where I want to make a comment about how much notes you should include. The purpose of notes is not to know everything you discussed when you were making your decisions. It's just to provide that overview of why you came to your final conclusion. And so you can see my example notes for County A is stakeholders are agreement this is a big problem, but it's not the biggest problem in our community. For County B notes, it's while the prevalence and trends are only moderate problems, stakeholders feel that the consequences are so severe that this should elevate the problem. So that is more than sufficient notes to include.
So Melinda, this is really your elevator speech. And imagine that you only have 30 seconds or 60 seconds in the elevator. Don't assume it's a 2-minute ride to the top of the Empire State Building.
Correct. It's enough to trigger memories and to document decisions, not the whole process.
Right.
Yes.
So these are some pretty good examples of notes that folks can replicate. If you think you're getting bogged down in your note sections, let us know. If you think you don't have enough, send us what you have. Within context, we have some of your other information from that particular page. But again, the purpose of the notes is to help a stranger understand within an elevator speech, your decision-making process.
Yeah, or even you looking back. One of the things we saw looking at the last needs assessments is it wasn't really always, it was not often clear how you came to those decisions. And so this just kind of highlights that. And it highlights it not just for your elevator speech, but also for you when you look back. I know in the moment, am very detailed and I can remember that. But over time that slides and I may forget. I may not, but it's definitely a possibility. And so it helps me to just have brief notes about how we decided things. And you can see again in that big box for the ranks that we would list the County A prevalence, trend, severity, and overall ranking. We just briefly note who's there. it's not important to have all the formal names. We don't need to know, like, when you're working with, say, the sheriff's office, we don't have to have the whole name of the agency. It's enough to just say sheriff's office or PD, whatever, just enough to know what those entities are. And those are, again, for mostly for in your community, to show that you came to these decisions with others in the county. And so I would organize it so first I have the full one county's full data, and then after that I would have the second county. And that'll make it so you can look down and compare, that you can consider the first county holistically. Unlike how we would recommend this if you were entering one county in a separate file, I recommend that if you're going to include multiple counties in one file, that you enter all your intervening variable data and your problem data before you go to stakeholders, because it's very likely that they'll approach things differently, and I believe it will be more efficient for you if you just enter all the data first. So in that sense, I again would probably just start with the youth prevention survey data, because that's going to be lots of the items. Then I would go to the next surveillance data source and so forth. And again, that's being recommended to enter both of those before you go to communities, just because there's probably going to be differences in how different communities want to do it. And we think it'll end up being easier if you do it that way.
Okay, Melinda, I think it's time that we kind of bring everything together from all the various steps and pieces we've talked about.
Yeah, so this is just kind of a recap, and it's mostly about how to approach the template, which is your documentation of your process. So we're doing our assessments to get a better understanding of the big problems in our community, what causes those, i.e. the intervening variables, what we have the capacity to address, and then trying to figure out that comprehensive strategy. For the documentation piece, it's going to be easiest if at the first level you just look through the template to see where do you have county level data versus LME/MCO level data. That's going to help you decide whether you want to include all counties in one file, or if you want to include them all in their individual files. And there's pros and cons, no right or wrong for either of those. But that choice does influence how you do your data entry. If you're going to do individual county files and you only have state supplied data sources, you're going to want to enter your LME/MCO data first, as that's going to reduce your duplication. So enter that first, make it a master file, and then resave it with each county's name. And so that's going to cut out a whole bunch of steps that you don't need to do more than one time. And if you're going to do it with multiple counties in one source, then you really just want to do it by data source. That's going to be the fastest, easiest way to do it. And once you do that, you'll be at the point where you can choose the biggest problems, target the root causes, so why these problems are existing in your community, and that you actually have the capacity to address, and then choose that right good comprehensive mix of strategies to really hit home change in that intervening variable. And so it tends to be far more effective if you can really address a single intervening variable at multiple angles to really create change. And so that's why it's so important to get down to the place where you're really choosing the most important intervening variables on the biggest problems in your communities. And it's better to do have a really focused effort on a smaller number of intervening variables than to have a lot of efforts, because you're hitting those messages in different ways when you target the single intervening variable in more than one strategy, more than one audience level, more than one CSAP strategy type.
Okay. Melinda, thank you so much for agreeing to join us this afternoon. To the viewers, we hope you found these 4 videos useful, and let us know if you would like Melinda and I to do more of these on other assessment-related topics and subtopics. If you have ideas or questions or suggestions for topics that we need to create some short guidance on, in the meantime, let us know. Put those comments in the comment box below. We'll be happy to see if we can work something up, or at the very least respond as quickly as we can to the individual question or issue or thought. Again, we really want you to be as successful as possible with as least stress and anxiety as possible. And that's really important to the entire assessment team and to Jessica and everyone who's involved in this project. So let us know how we can help you. Melinda, any final thoughts or words before we close up?
No, just that I echo those sentiments. We wanted to address questions that you guys were having, but we know we probably haven't captured them all, so we do encourage you to ask additional questions, to reach out and let us know how we can best support you in this process.
Yes. Again, thank you so much, and we encourage questions below. Please feel free to reach out. We have a technical assistance process that's open for the next couple of weeks. We're taking template stacks packages for review until July 20th, I believe, Melinda? Is that?
I believe it's the 15th of July.
The 15th. Usually it'll take us about 2 weeks to review those. We're asking programs to submit their review packages via the help desk ticketing system. That there's a email to, and there's if you look on the news link page of our TTA news system, you will find that link. You will also find that link in this post. I will go ahead and make reference to that post as well within this video blog series. And information about your final submission for final submission to the state office is still being worked on and tweaked currently. So we'll have more information about that in due course. I know folks are anxious to hear about that process as well. So in the meantime, let us know how we can help, and we've enjoyed being with you today. Take care.
Yes, I echo all those thoughts. Thank you all, and have a good week.